Record. Very good. Great. Well, welcome. My name is Nicole Gaines. I am the NIMAC Project Director. And apologies, due to a technical issue today, I do not have a camera, but I do want to assure everyone I am not a chat bot. I am an actual person, and I work with the NIMAC. And I've actually been with the NIMAC for since the inception of the project, so I have a long history with the project. And I'm happy to be talking with accessible media producers this afternoon about working with the NIMAC. So a couple of housekeeping things. I do want to be sure that as we move through the presentation this afternoon, that you have time for questions. I'm joined by Alexa Miller, who's the NIMAC librarian, and she will be monitoring the chat if you have any questions. And if you could keep yourself on mute if you're not asking a question, that would be great, but you're welcome to use your mics to ask questions as needed. So just want to let you know about that. Another thing, just as I just noted, this presentation is being recorded, and we will also have the PowerPoint posted on our website. And if you'd like us to email it to you, we're also happy to do that so that this will be available to you as a resource on an ongoing basis. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get into the content of today's presentation. We're going to start off with a PowerPoint that discusses some basics about the NIMAC, one or two policy updates, and then some services and system features for AMPS. And then we're going to move into a live demo. So I will just make a note that this presentation is going to be most helpful for folks who are newer to the NIMAC, but we hope that it will also be a good refresher to those who have a little bit more experience in working with the NIMAC and in the system with your accounts. So just to go ahead and launch into some basics about the NIMAC, this project was actually created legislatively, which is a little unusual, by IDEA 2004 to serve as the national source file repository for K through 12 textbooks and instructional materials. So what we do is we make files in the NIMAS format available for use in producing accessible formats for instructional materials used in elementary and secondary education. We've been in existence actually since 2006, and we have worked with over 160 publishers and received over 72,000 file sets. So we've grown quite a bit in the years since we have been in operation. All 50 states plus the eligible territories do work with the NIMAC, as does the Department of Defense. So if you are newer to the NIMAC, one of your questions may be, what does NIMAS mean? Well, NIMAS is an acronym that stands for the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard. This is an XML-based source file format, which was also created by IDEA 2004. It was actually come up with by a national file format panel, but it kind of came into existence officially through the IDEA legislation. It's the only file format that the NIMAC can receive, and it's not intended for distribution directly to students. So if you're an accessible media producer, you are probably well aware of that. Sometimes folks who are newer to the NIMAC, and what does the NIMAC do? It's not necessarily intuitive, but the file format is really designed to make it easier to or quicker to produce needed formats like Braille or DAISY or EPUB or large print. So it's a digital format. And when we say source file, that's exactly what we mean. It's a digital format that's intended to be turned into something else, not used directly as it is. The other thing that's really important to understand about NIMAS is that it is not a file format that publishers have on hand. It's not a result of print book or even digital book production in most cases. So this means that it can take up to 6 weeks or sometimes even more for NIMAS to be produced. And when we talk about how we get files, this is really an important piece of that, because the way that we get files is through the adoption contracts and purchase agreements of states and districts. This is also something that's written into the legislation itself, that There's not a blanket requirement on publishers to submit files to the NIMAC, so it is crucial and essential that when states and districts purchase new materials for use by students, that they include the NIMAS requirement in those purchase agreements and contracts. Um, the other thing from a logistical standpoint is that really what we want to have happen with the NIMAC is we want to have those files already available when there's a first time need for Braille to be produced or EPUB to be produced or large print to be produced. So we're going to talk a little later about the watch list and how we are happy to try to obtain NIMAS on request, but really what we want is to have it supplied as a part of those contractual agreements so that there's no delay in getting the file when there's a need identified to produce a format. In terms of the kinds of materials we receive, this is, again, is another aspect of the NIMAC that's in the legislation itself. We have a definition. It has several little pieces to it, but the long and short of it is that we are able to receive a wide range of student-facing instructional materials, but these need to be materials that are published primarily for elementary or secondary education. So we can basically we receive textbooks, workbooks, supplementary readers, and we do receive student-facing pages from some ancillaries like Blackline Masters. Categorically exempt, however, are materials that are for the exclusive use of the teacher, like teacher's editions of textbooks. Pre-2006 titles, NIMAS was not retroactive to materials already being used in schools. Fortunately, as time progresses, that issue becomes less of an issue over time, but it's still surprising. Sometimes we do get requests for materials published in 2000 or 2004, or back before NIMAS went into effect. We also, for the most part, do not receive trade books. The good news there is that there are other sources for trade books in a lot of cases. We can often refer folks out to other resources, including Bookshare in a lot of cases. We don't generally get college textbooks. Materials that are published primarily for higher education are not usually received. However, that can be sometimes a bit of a gray area, as if you guys work with any high school materials, you may be aware that there are often textbooks that are published both for use in advanced placement courses as well as college courses. And so we do receive some of those materials. So we're always happy to look into those if you have a question. And we also don't generally get reference books. I think reference books, as materials have become more digital, it's less likely that folks are using hard copy encyclopedias and that kind of thing. But that would be the kind of material that we would not be getting as well. I would like to make a side note that we can receive NIMAS now for some digital instructional materials. There are some technical limits of the specification regarding not being able to provide NIMAS for highly interactive materials, for example, or digital materials that are primarily video components or audio. But there are, when materials are primarily static text, static images with a linear reading order, we can accept NIMAS for that. We have not received a lot of NIMAS files for digital materials. We have received some, but this is an area that we are continuing to kind of work on providing some support out to the field on to get a greater level of traction on it. So as an accessible media producer, one of the things that's important is for you to understand what an authorized user is. Your account as an accessible media producer relies on authorized users to assign you files in the system when you need to produce an accessible format. So in terms of what that authorized user role is, these are individuals who have been designated by their state coordinator to have an account that provides full access to the NIMAC repository. So basically, I mentioned before that all 50 states and the eligible territories have coordinated with the NIMAC. And one of the things that they do as a part of that is they designate one point person in their state. It's usually at the SEA, the State Education Agency, to serve as the person who manages the authorized users for that state. Because NIMAS is a source file format and is not distributed directly to students, usually the number of authorized users in a state is fairly small. It's usually 5 or fewer, even though that's not a hard and fast rule. Some states have fewer, some have more. But these are individuals who can search and download files themselves, or they can assign files to registered accessible media producers. So the other thing about authorized users, they generally are from within the educational structure of the state, such as from at an instructional resource center, at the State Department of Education, or sometimes from a larger school district. So as an AMP account holder, these accounts allow you to download any file assigned by an authorized user. Now, the advantage to an AMP account is that these are freely available. They do not require that you be designated by a state coordinator. And these are also accounts that are freely available in terms of you may be a nonprofit, you may be a for-profit, you may work with one state, you may work with many states. And so it gives a little bit of flexibility there in terms of a range of different organizations who are producing accessible formats. So the flip side of that, however, is that there is more limited access to download files on the part of these account holders. One question that occasionally comes up from accessible media producer account holders is that, wait a minute, maybe I should be an authorized user for my state. And this sometimes does come up. Most accessible media producers require access to files only on a fairly occasional basis. They're not intensive users on an ongoing basis. However, if you find that you would benefit from having direct access, it may be appropriate for you to be designated as an authorized user for a given state. So, um, in terms of being able to be eligible to have that type of account, again, generally they're from the educational structure of the state, but it is also possible to be designated as an authorized user if you qualify as an authorized entity under Chafee. So if you're not sure what any of that means, but you still think you might need to be an authorized user, just feel free to contact us and we would be happy to talk with you more about that. Another thing that I would just like to kind of highlight as a part of promoting what AMPs do and the important role that they have in the field is I like to let folks know that when you register for the NIMAC, that your information is available to authorized users, but it's not made public. Some accessible media producers want to promote their services to a wider audience. Some accessible media producers may only work for a specific school district and their services are not available to others and they don't want that public uh, exposure in terms of what they do. So basically, if you are interested in sharing information about the services you offer, I want to be sure that you know about a different database called the Accessible Media Producers Directory that is an option for you in terms of making your services available to a broader public. And so if you download this later, you will actually it will actually take you to the AMP directory and you can kind of see it. But just in terms of if you are not plugged in and you would like to be, please feel free to email resource@aph.org and they would be happy to get you plugged in so that your information is available and is searchable on the web through that free service. So next I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about NIMAS file assignment. But before I do that, I just want to take a quick breath and see if there are any questions at this point about anything that we've covered about the kind of the basics and the overview. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward. So basically, NIMAS file assignment, this is really kind of the core of what your account is for and the functionality that's provided there. So again, once you have your account and it's activated, any authorized user in any state can assign you files for download. You may only work with one state, and that's fine. You'll just get assigned files from authorized users in that state. Um, The flip side of this is that sometimes there are different models that different states have in terms of getting materials to students. If you happen to be working on a project, but the person that you are working with doesn't happen to be an authorized user in the state, then and you need to find out, hey, who's my authorized user? I need to produce Braille for this school district. They're not an authorized user. Feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to get you connected to an authorized user if you need that. Another thing that's really important to know about the NIMAC is that a lot of what happens through the NIMAC system, the communication happens by email. Whenever you're assigned by a file, the system will send you an automated email to let you know, hey, this file is available in your download queue. That notification is going to actually tell you what the material is, the format, and who the user is who assigned you the file. And this is actually the slide that we have up right now is actually a little snip from an actual automated email from the system. And it tells you all of that information. So, and if you have any question about the information, you can just email or call the authorized user to say, hey, tell me more about this that you want to that you want me to produce. Ordinarily, you're already going to know what's going on with that. But this is just kind of something that's helpful for you to get so that you don't actually have to be going and logging into your account to see, hey, did I get any files assigned? You will get an automated email. Now, one of the things that is just a part of the world that we live in now is that as nefarious actors online have become more sophisticated, we find that spam filters, junk filters get stronger and stronger in order to try to protect us from phishing and other sorts of bad actors that are out there. So this is just a heads up that if you are having any issues or you happen to know from experience, hey, my organization's email filter for junk is super strong and I don't, I never get emails unless I whitelist a particular new email address. Wanted to let you know that the email address that your automated emails are going to come from is no reply -NIMAC at overdrive.com. So you may have to actually add this to your contacts list. If you have a really problematic filter, you may have to actually ask your IT department to whitelist it for you um, because there are, again, a lot of email servers anymore. They do not want to accept any automated email that comes from a server. So if you have issues with this and need further troubleshooting or help from the NIMAC, feel free to reach out. I think most times though, if you add it to your contacts, you'll be able to receive those emails. Another thing that I wanted to mention just in terms of your account information, we'll actually take a quick peek at this as a part of our uh, tour of the account itself, but your format capabilities are also a part of your account information it's an important part of your account information. And basically, the way that this works is, when you first registered as an accessible media producer, a part of your online registration was to select your format capabilities. And so a lot of times folks have selected these, and if you've worked for the NIMAC for a long time, maybe you've had changes to the formats that you can produce. Maybe you no longer produce eBay, for example, but now you produce UEB or UEB with Nemeth. And so you can view again, and I'm actually going to go back to this screen again. But you can go, if you go to user information and look at your account information, you can see all of the format capabilities that are associated with your account. In this case, what I'm showing here is, this is the complete list of format capabilities because this is a test account. And this is just to kind of show you what is in there now in terms of the options. But these are basically provided as a convenience for accessible media producers and the authorized users who are assigning files. They don't obligate you to creating a particular format or, restrict you to only producing that format. It's mainly just to facilitate the communication because, again, when the authorized user assigns you a file, they're going to pick um, from the formats that you have associated with your account and just say, this is the format that this is for just so you know. So over time, if you need to update those formats to reflect changes in what you produce, please let us know, nimac@aph.org, and we can update that information for you. I will say that one of the things we're looking at now, we currently have a system where making changes to account information has to be done by NIMAC staff, and there's kind of the rationale for that has to do with DRM and wanting to make sure that accounts aren't inadvertently transferred to new individuals and things like that. But we are looking into the possibility of kind of opening up so that making updates to accounts is a little easier. But at this time, if you have a change that you'd like to make, just email us and we will make those updates for you. On kind of a related note, another thing that we're doing right now is we are in the process of reviewing the format capability options. We're really kind of overdue, I think, in some ways to remove some of the outdated formats and have some new ones added. So we would be very much interested in your input on that. You're welcome to actually, if you have any thoughts in and would like to share them in the chat right now, you're welcome to do so. But what we've got now is, a list that many of these items were put in this list a long time ago. Some of them that we're looking into removing at this point include Daisy Audio and Daisy Audio Plus. Those actually aren't used by anybody at this point. We're also thinking that at this point, probably people are no longer producing eBay embossed or digital. So, but if you have any other thoughts in terms of adding formats, we're looking at adding probably PDF, EPUB, and if there are other formats that you produce and historically you've just had them under the other category, we'll probably keep the other category. But if we can add a few that just add a little bit more flexibility in there and a little more detail, we are happy to do that. So do let us know if you have ideas about that, especially in terms of formats that you produce that are not on the list. So NIMAC policy updates, not really a whole lot in this. This is kind of, if you had attended a webinar last year, this will not be news to you. And actually you will have, if you've been an AMP for a while, you will already know about this. But the most important change recently, in recent years, since February of 2021 at least, is that the NLS did update its eligibility guidelines. And so as a result of that, the NIMAC also updated its limitation of use agreement. These changes were really positive. They included expanding the pool of professionals who can certify eligibility, and they also eliminated the requirement that a medical doctor certify eligibility for the reading disabilities category of NLS eligibility. Because IDEA 2004 points to the NLS guidelines for NIMAS, that's why it affected the limitation of use agreement. We basically wanted to make sure that we had the up-to-date language in our agreements. So if you basically, if you are newer than the version of the limitation of use agreement that you received when you registered, it's already the right one. But if you have been on board since before May of 2021 and you don't think that you didn't receive the updated LUA, or for whatever reason you don't think that you sent it in, let us know. We'll check it out for you and make sure everything is copacetic. The next thing I'm going to talk about is some of the features in the system. One of the features that's relatively new for accessible media producers is the Watchlist research and Expedite service. If you can think of a snappier name for that, this is what we call it. It's kind of a long name, but it explains very well what it's all about. Basically, if you need a file and we don't already have it, it's likely that you're not going to know whether it should be in the NIMAC or not. We talked a little bit about procurement being a part of the way we get files, and also just the fact that we have a wide range of student-facing materials, but there are some exempt categories. So basically, for most folks who are directly producing accessible formats, it's probably kind of mysterious. In other words, you're not going to know, hey, there was a contract between this school district and this publisher. And so the long and short of it is, you have a built-in way in the system where you can add an ISBN to the watch list and we'll research it for you. We check every day. We review any items that are added to the watch list. And basically what we will do is if the title is within scope for NIMAS, in other words, it's not a trade book, it's not a teacher-only ancillary, we will request the file from the publisher. And occasionally the way that it happens is that the file will already be in production or, in the hopper at the publisher, and we can request that they expedite it. And if it's not already in production, we will request it from the publisher. The other thing that's kind of nice, and this gets back to that email thing again, is that when a requested ISBN is available in the NIMAC, you will receive an automated email to let you know. The other thing that's kind of nice is that if it's outside of scope, we'll still research it and see if we can locate another alternative for you. For example, we do find that some of the higher education publishers, we don't get NIMAS from them, but some of them will provide a PDF on request, and a lot of times that can be really helpful. Next thing that I want to talk about just really quickly is MathML. MathML has started to get a little bit better support in software. For a long time, there was not a lot of software that could use MathML, but the situation is getting a little better over time. And we're also starting to see more MathML from publishers. So we just want to make sure that folks kind of have a little bit of familiarity with what MathML is and how it's used. And so basically, MathML is not a requirement for NIMAS, but it is optional XML markup for math and scientific notation. Okay, and so basically, in the past and historically in print textbooks, math is supplied as images. The equations are not provided in the text itself, but as images. And that content, when it is created in the NIMAS format, then that means that those equations are also images in the NIMAS file. So obviously, images cannot be automatically converted into Braille. So one of the benefits of MathML is that it is actually XML markup that can be automatically used or used to automatically generate Braille and other accessible formats. So that's the benefit. One of the things that is the case, though, is that depending on the software that you have, it may or may not support MathML. So what we have actually done in the system is we have created the option that if the file that we received from the publisher contains MathML, but your software can't use MathML, you can choose to download the file with the MathML stripped out. Now, the reason that this works is that when we receive a file that contains MathML, we still require the publisher to provide what we call fallback images, so that if we have to strip out the MathML, we can put those images into the NIMAS file so that you can use the file as if it never had MathML. So in other words, the content is there, it's just there as images and not as MathML. So, and I'll show you what that looks like during the demo in terms of at the point of download. Sometimes we get a question about whether files can contain MathML or not, or how do I know? Generally, this isn't going to be super confusing because you're not even going to see a no MathML download option if MathML isn't present in the file. It's only going to show up if that file contains MathML. Okay, so if you know that your software can't work with MathML, you just choose that no MathML download. Okay, there's also a couple of other ways that I'll let you know about. This here, what we have is just a kind of a screen snip here showing the full download no MathML option. And again, that's where you're going to see it. If you don't see that, you don't have to worry about it. If you're actually looking at the system record, and when we're taking a look, I'll show you how you can look at the detailed record. We also have this metadata in the system itself. If you do not see in the second column at the very end a MathML entry there in the metadata, then that means that there's no MathML in the file, and you don't have to worry about it. And then the third way is that if you've already downloaded the file, You can also check by just looking at the top of the XML file. This is a little more in the weeds for the more techie people, but if you actually were to open that XML file in Notepad or an XML editor, then you would actually see that there are several lines at the top that reference MathML. You're only going to see those if the file has MathML in it. So before we move on to the demo, I just want to take a couple more minutes and talk about tools for working with NIMAS and some work that we have underway that we're kind of excited about and that you may be interested in getting involved with going forward. So there are some good tools available currently for working with NIMAS, especially for Braille production, but it can sometimes be difficult to locate software for other formats. And just as a case in point, large print can be really tricky. If you know and have InDesign, NIMAS can work really well with InDesign, but it's expensive software and it's not super easy to use off of the shelf. So one of the things that we're really interested in doing is trying to build out some of the resources on the NIMAC website and provide information about available resources. So if you have software that you're really happy with, like, hey, this is what I use with NIMAS and it works really great, let us know because we would be interested in the positive experiences that you have, or even the negative experiences if there is software that is supposed to support NIMAS, but you're finding that it really doesn't work very well for you. We'd be interested in those experiences as well. And I also wanted to just share some news that we've been working with the DAISY Consortium this year. They provide a free conversion tool called the DAISY Pipeline, and they've been working on creating a new user interface for the DAISY Pipeline too. And as a part of that work, we've been working with them to try to get better support for NIMAS into that tool. Some folks, well, without going into the weeds, it's not a super user-friendly tool at this point. It's more of kind of a developer level tool, but we're really working with them to make it a more user-friendly tool that can provide formats that are made um, out of the NIMAS format, including EPUB and RTF. So we'll definitely keep you posted as that work progresses. We're hoping that by the middle of the summer, we may be able to make some kind of announcement about better support in the DAISY pipeline. And then the other thing that I wanted to just mention is that we have kind of started taking some initial steps in exploring the possibility of updating the NIMAS specification. And this may sound very tentative, and the reason for that is that in terms of the specification itself, it is a part of the IDEA regulations. And so it's not an easy thing to change the specification. And frankly, we're probably not going to be looking at dramatic changes to the specification, but we are interested in input if you have um, any kinds of ideas. If you work on the more technical side, especially if you happen to have your own software and you work with NIMAS with your own software and have ideas on what would improve the format, we'd really like to hear from you. If you're wondering, like, well, what does this actually mean? What are some possible thoughts? Some examples of this that we've actually thought about are taking some of the um, parts of NIMAS that are currently optional and making them required. Alt text is a really good example of this. We find that when alt text is high quality, it's really valuable for students. It can be really helpful. Um, at the time that NIMAS first came into existence, alt text was not something that the folks who were developing the regs, which weren't me, but those folks were thinking, this is probably a too heavy of a lift for publishers to say you've got to do alt text for all of your NIMAS files. But we live in a time when, digital accessibility is much more on the radar. We've got a lot more accessible digital content that's being produced by publishers. And so we may be at a point in the history of the specification where requiring alt text is really not an unreasonable expectation. In a similar way, MathML can be super valuable if your software can work with it. And that's another area that we could look into providing or just kind of having that be a requirement rather than an optional piece of the NIMAS specification. I will just say that In the coming year, we're going to be looking at other mechanisms to kind of a little more systematically gather input. And if we were to go through this regulatory updating process, I would just note that it would take a while. It's not something that would happen in just a few months. We'd probably be looking at about a 2-year timeline to make any changes. But we are interested in your feedback at any time. So if anything occurs to you right away, you're thinking, oh, it would be really great if A, B, or C, let us know. Another thing that I would just like to point to, and this is directed specifically to the Braille producers in the audience. The NIMAC did, for the first time, host a couple of courses last year for transcribers using Braille 2000 and Duxbury. And I would just like to let folks know that those trainings continue to be available. They are archived, and the videos and slides are available on our website. And I will actually show a screenshot of our website, NIMAC.us. There's a specific tab for accessible media producers. That's where you can find those slides. And if you happen to work for a Prison Braille program, we know that sometimes they are not able to access streaming content or internet content at all. We are also happy to provide these training sessions to you on a flash drive if that would be helpful for your organization. So just let us know if that would be useful to you. As a follow-up to that, we are still interested in getting some transcriber user groups set up for a little bit of ongoing support. I will say that we've had a challenging time identifying somebody who might be interested in facilitating the Duxbury group. If you happen to know, if you are interested in helping us out with that, please reach out and let us know. This would be a paid opportunity. We pay you for your time if you're interested in helping us with that initiative. And this again is our NIMAC.us. This is our informational website, and I have on the screen here circled the Accessible Media Producers tab. This is where today's presentation and the PowerPoint will be archived, and it's also where you can find those courses that I just mentioned. So with that, I'm going to move on now and talk a little bit about AMP accounts and do kind of a little bit of a quick tour of the functionality. Before I do that, I just want to take a quick moment though and see if there are any questions about the content we've covered so far. Okay, it looks pretty quiet. Okay. Oh, I think there's a question. Okay, question about the archive training materials. The archive training materials are actually, I can just show you right now. If you go to the NIMAC website, nimac.us, and go to Accessible Media Producers, that tab, you will actually see the Resources tab, okay? And right under Resources, these are generally in reverse chronological order, so today's presentation will be found as the first video under that tab. And then the course materials are under AMP Updates at the bottom of that page, and you can access the free training courses from that page. Each session and the PowerPoints from each session are available there. So you're very welcome. Okay, so at this time, what I'd like to do is take a moment and just walk through the AMP account. If you've been working in the system, you're probably familiar with some of the things that I'm going to cover today, but maybe not all. So just going to take an opportunity here to walk through the system. And another thing, actually, I'm going to log back off here because I want to make a point. One thing that sometimes comes up with regard to the usernames for the NIMAC is that we all have a million logins these days, and 99.9% of the time they are our email address. And NIMAC is an exception. We have a specific convention in terms of the way that user IDs are constructed for the NIMAC, and it's not your email address. So sometimes folks will try the forgot password link, and because they've not only forgotten their password but their login ID, they never get the password reset. So this is just to say, if you happen to have a gap and you haven't worked in the NIMAC for a while and you don't remember your username, just reach out and we're happy to look that up for you, because we know that sometimes those are not super intuitive. So moving on to your AMP account. Basically, whenever you log in, your title assignments page, that's going to be your landing page. And this makes sense because this is the primary purpose for your account, is to be able to see your title assignments and download files, right? So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But before we get to that, I want to spend a little time up here in the upper right-hand corner and talk about a few other features of the system that you may not be aware of. First, I'm going to go up here to user information, and I'm going to go up to the My Account information. I had a screenshot of this earlier, and what I would like to ask everyone to do is to just go in sometime when you have an opportunity and check out your format capabilities and see, does this accurately reflect the work that you do? And if not, if there's something that you would like to add, let us know, and we can update that information. If there's something you need to take off of your list, we will update that information for you, so that that can be as accurate and up to date as possible. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that if you're under user information and choose my sub users, one of the things that's really nice as an accessible media producer is that if you work with other folks, some folks are individual, you might be an individual Braille transcriber, or you might work with an organization that has more than one staff person. So as the administrative user for your organization or agency, you can add additional users that have their own login and password to be able to log in and download inventory. So the thing that's also really nice about this is that these accounts do not expire, and you can really set up as many of them as you need. And it's very intuitive and easy. You just put the person's name, their email address, and when you click Save Changes, then it's going to email that person a login ID and a password, and you're done. What you will see when you go in here, if you've created a user, like we see there's one sub user currently for this account, their name happens to be Patient Bear. Um, and once you've created an account, you can go in and you can edit it if you need to. If the person's email address changes or something like that, you can also reset their password or delete the account if you have somebody who leaves the organization. So again, this is an optional feature in the system. If you don't need it, you don't have to worry about it, but it's there if it's useful to you. Along a similar line, we're going to go down now and look at the little line of menu options starting with publisher contact information. This is another optional feature in the system. Basically, every publisher that works with the NIMAC, you can see all of the contact information that we have for that company. One caveat I would say is that if you have a need that's either related to a problem with a file or needing a file that you're not finding in the system, we really like to be looped on those. Sometimes we can actually help expedite resolutions in both of those cases. And when there's an issue with the file, we particularly want to know that because we work directly with virtually all of the conversion vendors who are producing files. So we want to be sure that if they've made a mistake or they need to be aware of a problem, we want to make sure that that gets to the right folks. So with those caveats, I will just say that if it's helpful for you to have the access to publisher information, it is available in the system to you at any time. You can search within. We have about 100 we have about 170. We have several we have a few test accounts, but even subtracting those, that we've got a lot of publishers now. So So basically, you can search within that if you know part of the name or all of the names if you want to zero in on um, a particular publisher. So that's something that's available to you. Over to the right of this, we'll actually click on title assignments here. And this is just kind of a little reminder that if you're moving through the system, if you are on a different screen, you can always return to your landing page by clicking title assignments or just clicking the NIMAC logo in the upper left of this screen. Reports, this is basically another optional feature. If you, for whatever reason, if you find that having a report of your own download activity is useful to you, you have the ability to do that by whatever start date and end date you want. And there are a few different options for grouping the data. It will export as a CSV file that you can open in Excel or any other spreadsheet program. And then the last optional feature that I want to talk about, we talked a little bit about the watch list. And so I want to kind of take just a minute here and talk a little bit about that. It's really, again, it's fairly straightforward. You basically just type in the number and click create, or you can actually just hit enter, and it's going to bounce down into your watch list. And here we see that this number, the status is not submitted to the NIMAC, which is what we'd expect, especially since this is not even a valid ISBN. So one of the caveats for the watch list is that it's usually best if you can copy and paste the ISBN from some other source rather than typing it in. Sometimes you don't have that option. You do want, both when you're searching and when you're adding to the watch list, take out any hyphens if there are hyphens in there. Um, but one of the things I will say is that the system works pretty well, but it doesn't know everything, so it's not going to know if you have made a typographical mistake. We'll find it, of course, if we can't find the material or anywhere online. We'll reach out and say, hey, we're not finding this ISBN. Can you provide a little bit more information to us about that? And kind of along those lines, one of the things that we are working on right now with Overdrive, who's our system vendor, is we're working on adding a kind of an optional notes field so that if you have some material that's particularly esoteric, and by that I mean like state editions, because sometimes state editions for whatever reason, publishers don't list them on their website. They list the national editions, but not the state editions. So sometimes those ISBNs can be hard to track down. So we'll keep you posted on that. It will just be kind of a little notes field where if you want to provide some additional information about, the title or the publisher, you would be able to do that at the point of adding it to your watch list. Another couple things I'll just mention is that it's possible that when you are adding a number to the watch list, a status could also possibly be awaiting corrections. If you see something that says awaiting corrections, that's actually a really good sign because it means we've already reviewed the file, but we're waiting for the publisher to fix something in order for us to be able to certify the file. And then there's also another status that indicates that it is in process, which just means that it has not yet been certified. And in those cases, we can expedite those. And so it's always, when you see that, then it's happy news because it means that you're probably going to be able to get that more quickly. If you are ever in your watch list and you see a status of certified, that means that it was certified after you added it, because the page will not let you add something that's already in the system. It'll tell you, hey, this is already available. You don't have to add this to the watch list. So the the uh, takeaway from that is just that if you happen to go in and see, oh, hey, these two items are certified, but I never got an email, then that would be an indication that there's an issue with the automated emails getting to you. So anyway, again, this is an optional service. We encourage you to use it. It's actually helpful for us to know when materials are needed, what kinds of materials are needed, but that we haven't received the files for those materials yet. So with that, I am going to jump back to the landing page, and we're going to take a couple minutes here talking about downloading the files. And again, we have a pretty linear, vertical rather, kind of layout to most of the pages. Your title assignments are going to show up, and if you have a whole bunch of them, you can actually choose how many you want to view. You can view up to 100. Um, if you actually have that many, though, one of the things that I like to point out to folks is that you see that you have an active queue, which is going to be the default where you land, but there's also what's called the completed queue. And so if you jump over here, this is basically, again, it's an optional thing, but it's a place where you can put your files after you've downloaded them, and you just don't want to see them in your active queue anymore. The thing that's kind of nice about the way that the system works is that if you've downloaded something and moved it to the completed queue, you can still move it back. If for some reason something comes up and you're like, oh my gosh, I really need to download that file again, you can. You don't lose it. But it's just a matter of if you are done with something, like we'll just say, I'm done with the Springboard writing workshop. You just can click on the move to completed that we see up here, that box there, and it will go away and it will be found in the completed queue after that. If I need to move it back, I just select it and move it back to active from there. Another thing from the active queue that can be kind of helpful is you will see over to the right, there is a search within box. This is, you may not need this if you're not doing tons of files, but if it's helpful, you can also do a search by the identifier or ISBN or title from within that search box and zero in if you need a specific file. I'm going to clear search terms and go back to the complete queue there. Another thing before we actually go into downloading it that I want to point out is that you can generate a queue report or just kind of export a list of all of the things that are in your queue at any time if you are interested in doing that. Just another little feature of the system. So what we're going to do now is we're going to click Ready Common Core Math Instruction. I'm going to add that to my downloads. As you may have noticed here, you can actually choose everything on your list or choose everything and then unclick a couple of them. So I think folks are probably fairly used to the way that this works just from working with email systems, but it's a pretty standard way of having that work. You can do downloads for more than one item at a time. I will note, and you can also move things to the completed, move more than one at a time. When it comes to downloading, one of the caveats there is that you have to choose the same type of download for all of the materials. So it has to be either with images or without images for all of the files. So if you have some files where you need images and others where you don't, then that would be a case where you probably would not want to do a batch download operation on that. So if you add to downloads, you're going to get this little dialog box here. The limitation of use agreement is exactly the same as the one that you signed in the limitation of use agreement. So there's not anything new there. When we talked earlier about MathML, I wanted to kind of highlight this is what it is actually going to look like. This happens to be a file that has MathML. If you choose the full download option, you are going to get the MathML. And if you choose the XML only download, you're still going to get the XML that has MathML. So if you don't want MathML, this is the option that you want to pick. So we're just going to say XML download for the purposes of this. And then I just say that I will agree to abide by the limitation of use agreement, and you'll get a confirmation that says your download requests are being processed. Now, you may be thinking, this is very interesting. Why do I go to a different page to complete the download? And the reason for this, and we're going to click on My Downloads to go to the page. The reason for this is because at the point when you request a download, there are several things that happen. So on the server side, the server's going and pulling that file and it's duplicating that file. And then it's also fingerprinting and watermarking the file. And so these are all steps that, depending on the size of the file, they can take a few seconds. You see here when we go to My Downloads, I see that this is a pending download, which means that the processing hasn't completed yet. And I will just also note that when you are on this screen, it will not automatically refresh. So if you're seeing pending or processing there, you do have to refresh your own browser in order to see when that has changed. So this was relatively quick. If we had a file that was maybe 700 megabytes, that process is going to take a little bit longer. And related to that, you'll see that above the download list there, there's a little button where you can say, send me an email notification when a requested file is ready for download. So that's actually something you can set here. You can also set it in your user information if that's something that's helpful for you, if you want to just get an email later. But most of the time, it's not going to take that long for the file to show up. Once the file is here, that means that it's been processed, it's ready to go. You can download it as many times as you need it from here by clicking the download button, and then it's just going to act like any other Windows download, or if you have a Mac, any other kind of Mac download. And you can also, if you've downloaded it and you like to be tidy and you want to delete it, you can just delete that from your downloads. And again, it's not deleting the file that you downloaded to your machine. It's just deleting that entry from your downloads page. If you find out later that you want to download that again, you can just go back to your list here and send it to your downloads again. So again, fairly straightforward. In terms of the way that the display is set up, if you do happen to get a lot of downloads, it's kind of nice to know that you can sort by the authorized user, the date assigned. If you've downloaded the file, it'll also show you the date downloaded. And you can also sort by the format requested or by the title. So just several ways that you can kind of manage the data that shows up there. So with that, that's kind of it in terms of our tour uh, of the actual portal and the account. Are there any questions about anything that we've covered? Any questions anybody has? Okay, well, you're welcome to ask any questions. Um, and I would just like to note before we sign off is that as a part of our reporting to OSAP, we really, well, and also as a part of improving our services, we really value your input and yes, your input. So what Alexa's going to do, we actually have a very, very short, like I think it would take like 1 minute survey about the webinar today, and she's going to place that in the chat. If you would please be willing to take just a minute. That does help us a lot. It helps us with our reporting to OSAP, and it helps us with our developing trainings and so forth. So we super, super appreciate that. And I would just also say, again, if you have any input regarding the format capabilities, anything you'd like to see us add or take away, we would love to hear from you. And I believe that that is probably it for now. We'll keep you posted on the news about the pipeline as well as the ongoing initiative to get input on the specification. So with that, I will just say thanks everybody so much for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to participate in our training. So thank you very much. And with that, I think we can stop the recording, Alexa.